The moon hung heavy in the sky, spilling silver light across the forest clearing, painting the world in shades of mystery. She moved gracefully through the shadows, her heart pounding as though it knew a secret her lips refused to speak. Around her, the pack gathered in the clearing, laughter and low murmurs filling the night air. But she kept her eyes down, her hand brushing along the smooth fabric of her cloak. She belonged to another, or at least, that was the story she had woven for herself. Her breath caught when a sharp instinct pricked at the edge of her consciousness. Somewhere in the crowd, eyes as piercing as winter ice were watching her, eyes that made her chest tighten, that stirred a yearning she couldn't allow herself to name. The Alpha. She shifted slightly, careful to keep her posture neutral, forcing her smile to appear natural as she greeted the others. The pack didn't know her truth, the fire that pulsed in her veins, the soul that was bound irrevocably to the Alpha who stood on the edge of her vision, silent and commanding. One wrong glance, one slip, and the fragile world she had built could shatter. She felt the weight of his gaze on her and told herself that belonging to another was enough to protect her secret. Yet even as she whispered his name in denial, her body betrayed her, a shiver running down her spine that had nothing to do with the night's chill. She had tried to fool the pack, to fool herself, but under the full moon no lie could remain hidden forever. The next evening the gathering was louder, wilder. Lanterns swung from tree branches, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the pack. And there he was, all impossibly commanding, the Alpha whose presence made her heart stutter and falter. His eyes, dark and unreadable, found hers across the throng. She forced herself to look away, pretending interest in the conversation around her. But instinctively, she felt the pull, the invisible thread tugging her soul toward his. He approached with silent authority, and the murmurs of the pack seemed to fade into nothing. Enjoying the festivities, he asked, his voice low and smooth, carrying a weight that made her chest ache. She hesitated, clinging to her carefully constructed facade. Yes, very much. Her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. A flicker of amusement, or was it something darker, crossed his expression. "You lie well," he said, and the weight behind those words pressed down on her like the earth itself. Her heart raced. She wanted to pull away, to deny the magnetic pull between them, but it was futile. Every glance, every subtle movement seemed to weave them tighter together in a bond she couldn't escape, even if she wanted to. Her thoughts scrambled, a storm she could not tame, and yet she maintained her composure. For now, but she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The air was tense, taut with anticipation. The pack had gathered near the ceremonial fire, and all eyes turned toward her as she stepped forward. She raised her head high, forcing a calm she did not feel. "I belong to another," she declared, her voice steady, the lie rolling off her tongue as though it were truth. The Alpha's eyes darkened, a storm hidden in the depths. Murmurs rippled through the pack. "You lie," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the circle like a blade. She felt the heat of embarrassment prick her cheeks, but she refused to waver. "I will not deny it again," she insisted, her gaze flitting to the man she had claimed to belong to, though he remained oblivious to her inner turmoil. Her body reacted despite her words, a heat that betrayed the lie she desperately clung to. The Alpha's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing at his sides, and a low growl escaped his throat. Her chest constricted. She had humiliated him, yes, but more than that, she had exposed herself, however unwillingly, to a truth that neither of them could ignore. Later, in the quiet of her room, she let herself sink into the shadows, the mask of composure slipping from her face. Her heart still pounded from the evening's confrontation, from the Alpha's gaze that had seemed to pierce straight through her soul. She placed her hands on the table, feeling the familiar warmth of her hidden power stir beneath her skin. If anyone knew what she could do, what she carried within her very essence, chaos would consume the pack. And yet the thought of revealing herself to him who felt like her soul's counterpart, sent a thrill through her that she could not deny. A soft knock at the door, her breath hitched, he was outside, waiting. The Alpha, calm yet imposing, whose presence could unbalance her even in silence. "You should rest," he said simply. There was no demand in his tone, only the quiet inevitability of command. I cannot, she whispered, and he tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her knees weak. They stood there, a silence heavy with unsaid words, until finally, the pull between them grew too strong to ignore. Moonlight spilled across the clearing as they found themselves alone. Every movement was careful, deliberate, every glance laced with tension that neither dared name. "You should go," she murmured, yet her voice trembled, betraying her. "And leave you?" His hand brushed hers. A spark ignited that neither could contain. The world seemed to contract around them, the sounds of the pack fading until it was just them, two souls circling an invisible tether. She swallowed hard, a forbidden longing blooming inside her. I cannot," she admitted, though the words sounded like surrender. He stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the cool night air. "Then you will not deny it forever," he said, and the weight behind his words wrapped around her heart like a vise. The night stretched on, full of stolen moments and unspoken promises, and every heartbeat, every shiver of her body, reminded her that the soul knew its alpha even when the mind refused to admit it. The night air was sharp with anticipation, the forest whispering secrets through rustling leaves. She had hoped that the stolen moments under the moonlight would remain hidden, yet the pack had eyes everywhere, and nothing stayed secret for long. A new presence shifted through the shadows, all confident and undeniably dangerous. He stepped forward with a predatory grace, the rival suitor whose claim over her was as bold as it was foolish. "I see my efforts have not gone unnoticed," he said, a smirk curling his lips as he studied her, as if she were already his. Her chest tightened. The alpha, who had been standing silently nearby, stiffened, his muscles taut like coiled steel. The air between them crackled with tension, a silent storm that threatened to explode. His dark eyes, intense and unyielding, bore into the rival. "You will leave her be," the alpha said, his voice a low growl that sent ripples through the rival's confident posture. Yet even as he spoke, her pulse betrayed her, every nerve alive with the dangerous thrill of being caught between two powerful forces. She began, but the words died on her tongue. Her heart and mind warred violently. Safety urged her to step back, to cling to the facade she had so carefully built. Desire whispered for a different path, one that trembled between the alpha's intensity and the rival's alluring danger. The rival laughed softly, circling her like a wolf marking its territory. The alpha's growl deepened, a warning that resonated in her very bones. She had thought herself protected, thought the night belonged to her carefully constructed lies. But now the forest seemed smaller, the darkness closer, and the danger unmistakable. Her hands trembled. She had never felt more torn, between safety and desire, between the pull of fate and the weight of pretense. And as the rival's gaze lingered too long, she knew this night was far from over. A sudden movement in the corner of her eye, a flash of silver fur, and instinct screamed that the alpha would not allow this challenge to stand. Her breath caught, her heart hammering, as the night itself seemed to hold its breath. The cliffhanger here sets up the inevitable confrontation between the alpha and the rival, heightening tension and the slow burn romance. The forest seemed impossibly still, yet her mind was a whirlwind she could not tame. The rival's shadow lingered in her thoughts, a constant reminder of the fragile illusion she had tried to maintain. Her chest ached, not just with desire, but with guilt, a betrayal of the lies she clung to so desperately. She moved through the clearing, hands clenched at her sides, every rustle of leaves making her heart jump. The alpha's presence followed her like a storm on the horizon, silent but undeniable. He did not speak, yet the weight of his gaze pressed against her like the world itself was watching. "I can't," she whispered to herself, the words lost to the night. Her mind screamed to deny him, to protect the pretense of safety she had crafted, but every nerve, every heartbeat betrayed her. She belonged nowhere but in the orbit of the alpha she had spent so long resisting. Then he was beside her, steps silent against the forest floor, yet impossible to ignore. "Why do you fight it?" he asked, voice low, almost a growl, yet threaded with something that made her tremble. His dark eyes searched hers, and for a moment she felt exposed, every secret laid bare under the moon's indifferent gaze. Her voice faltered. She wanted to speak, to admit everything, but the words died in her throat. Her soul screamed with the truth, yet her lips remained prisoners of the lies she had woven. The Alpha reached out, his hand hovering near hers, a silent question, a challenge, a claim. She stepped back instinctively, heart pounding with longing and fear. "You can't," she whispered. "It's impossible." His eyes darkened, a storm threatening to break. "Nothing about us is impossible," he said, the promise in his tone as intoxicating as it was terrifying. "You feel it too. Don't lie to yourself anymore." Her breath caught, a shiver racing down her spine. Desire and fear collided in a way that made her knees weak, yet the safety of denial still called to her. She was trapped between two truths, the one she had sworn to uphold and the one her soul had always known. A sudden rustle behind them. He stiffened, his protective instincts flaring, and the rival stepped into the clearing once more, bold and daring. "I think she belongs to me," he declared, a challenge sharp as a blade. The Alpha's growl rolled through the night, low and menacing. Her heart clenched. She had never felt so torn, between safety and desire, between the life she had claimed and the soul she could no longer deny. The night held its breath, the tension hanging like a knife between them, and she realized there was no turning back. Something had shifted irrevocably, and the storm of emotions had only just begun. The full moon rose high, spilling silver light across the forest like molten silk. Every leaf, every shadow seemed to pulse with an energy she had long feared and denied. Her chest tightened as the warmth within her stirred, a force she had buried deep, one that refused to remain silent any longer. She stumbled back, clutching her arms around herself as a shiver ran through her, unnatural and fierce. The air crackled, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Her powers, long dormant and hidden, were awakening, and she had no control. The Alpha appeared beside her as if drawn by instinct alone. His eyes, dark and blazing, mirrored the pull she felt, a tether between them stronger than words or reason. "You're losing control," he said, his voice low, commanding, yet threaded with concern. I can't stop it," she admitted, trembling. Energy radiated off her in waves, and the ground beneath her seemed to hum with her growing power. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as the moonlight wrapped around her, revealing glimpses of the true depth of her strength. He reached out, grasping her hands with a firm, grounding touch. The moment their skin met, a pulse of recognition surged between them, a connection she had tried to deny but could no longer escape. The world seemed to tilt, the night air vibrating with magic and fate. A sudden roar in the distance. One of the rival faction's pack members, sensing the disturbance, napped her attention outward. Her energy flared, uncontrollable and wild, a living force that the forest itself seemed to acknowledge. "You're more than you realize," the Alpha murmured, his forehead brushing against hers. "And I am yours as much as you are mine. Accept it." The pull between them was irresistible. Her pulse raced, her mind spun, and for the first time, she felt her soul answering the call it had always known. The curse that had shadowed her life, that had made her claim another and hide in lies, was stirring, but with the Alpha beside her, it was no longer a threat. Then, a flash of silver fur, danger closing in. An instinct screamed that this awakening would not go unnoticed. She gasped as energy lashed outward, a force she could barely contain. The night was alive, tense and waiting. The Alpha's voice cut through the storm. "Hold on to me. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Her lips parted in a silent promise, and the forest seemed to tremble with the unspoken truth. Nothing would ever be the same again. The clearing was alive with tension. The rival faction had gathered, their eyes sharp, teeth bared, and whispers of discontent cutting through the crisp night air. She stood beside the Alpha, her heart pounding not just from fear, but from the undeniable pull of destiny that tethered her to him. Every muscle in her body hummed with the energy of the curse, now fully awakened and impossible to ignore. "Step back," the Alpha commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Even those who had questioned him before knew the weight behind his words. The rival pack leader's smirk faltered for a moment, and she allowed herself the briefest flicker of relief. "I will not let her belong to you," the rival snarled, stepping forward, claws glinting in the moonlight. "She's mine by right." The Alpha's eyes darkened, and a growl rolled from deep within his chest, vibrating through the ground beneath them. "By right," he repeated, voice dripping with incredulity. "She belongs to no one but herself. But mark me, anyone who threatens her will answer to me." Her pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she could not deny the swelling warmth at his side. He was her anchor, her shield against the chaos that now surrounded them. Even as the rival lunged, she felt the energy within her respond, a surge of power that made the very air hum. Claws met claws. Fur bristled, the forest erupted into chaos, but she did not run. She lifted her hands, letting the power flow through her, a shimmering aura that crackled around her fingers. The Alpha's gaze met hers, a silent communication passing between them. Fight together, stand together, survive together. The rival hissed, stunned by the sudden burst of energy. A howl tore from the Alpha's throat, commanding attention, asserting dominance, and the pack fell into line, their loyalties swaying under the Alpha's sheer force of will. She felt the tether between them strengthen with every heartbeat, their souls synchronizing in the pulse of magic and destiny. A sudden surge of power, hers and his combined, sent the rival tumbling back, defeated but not destroyed. Breathless, she clung to the Alpha, her chest pressed to his, the forest around them vibrating with the residue of unleashed strength. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice soft now, filled with concern that belied the storm of dominance he had wielded moments ago. She shook her head, still trembling from adrenaline. I'm fine," she whispered, though the truth was that she had never felt so alive, so exposed, and so irrevocably tied to someone else. The night settled around them once more, but the world had shifted. Nothing could erase the truth now. They were bound not by words, but by destiny, by power, and by the raw, unbreakable pull of their souls. And yet, even in victory, the danger lingered, a whisper on the wind, a shadow at the edge of the forest. She knew the battle had been won, but the war for hearts, pack loyalty, and hidden power was far from over. The firelight in the pack hall flickered across her face, highlighting the tension she had carried for weeks. Lies she had woven so carefully now lay in fragments at her feet. Every whispered secret, every false claim of belonging to another had come crashing down. The rival had been driven off, the Alpha had fought for her, but the exposure of her true self left her raw and trembling. Her gaze met his across the hall, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide anything. The intensity in his dark eyes was like a tangible force, pulling at the fragile threads of her courage. She wanted to flee, to hide, yet every step toward him felt like an inevitability she could not resist. "You didn't have to face them alone," he said, his voice low, carrying that dangerous mix of authority and concern that always left her breathless. I couldn't lie anymore," she admitted, voice trembling as she let the walls crumble. "I couldn't pretend, not to you, not to myself." He closed the distance between them, each step measured, deliberate, as though claiming space that was always meant to belong to him. "Then don't," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered, grounding her in a way that made the world outside the hall fade. The pack murmured around them, but she felt only the pull of his presence, the silent declaration that no one could challenge the bond now forged between them. Her soul throbbed with recognition, the truth of her connection, undeniable and overwhelming. A sudden, sharp knock at the hall door startled her. Instinct screamed caution, her heart lurched, another threat, another challenge. She looked to him, and he stepped forward protectively, his aura fierce yet calm where she had felt fear. Whatever lay beyond that door, she knew they would face it together. No more lies, no more pretenses. The Alpha's hand found hers, a silent vow, and she felt the last remnants of her old fears begin to dissolve. But in the quiet aftermath, the unspoken tension lingered. an undeniable promise that their story, dangerous and passionate, was only beginning. The night was still, yet alive with energy, the full moon casting a silver glow over the clearing. She stood beside him, the alpha, feeling the pull between them as tangible as the cool night air brushing her skin. Every heartbeat, every shiver of her nerves, whispered the truth she had denied for so long. They were bound, their souls intertwined beyond choice or reason. He reached for her, his hand firm yet gentle, fingers brushing against hers in a silent promise. No more lies. He murmured, his voice low, reverberating through her very being. You are mine, and I am yours, always. She swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. Her powers, fully awakened now, responded to him, the energy coursing between them like an electric current. It was more than attraction. It was inevitability. Their bond, forged in secret, tested by rivals, and tempered in fire and fear, now demanded recognition. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, the vulnerability making her pulse race. I've tried to fight it, to hide myself. He cupped her face, thumb brushing along her cheekbone, eyes dark with passion and unyielding devotion. Fear changes nothing. I've felt it too, but now nothing can separate us, not lies, not enemies, not even the curse that haunted you. You are mine, and I will guard you with everything I am. A surge of energy pulsed outward from her, a radiant glow that wrapped around them both. The forest seemed to hum with the resonance of their union, leaves rustling in time with their heartbeat. Her soul quivered, trembled, and finally surrendered to the connection she had denied for so long. Their lips met in a searing, deliberate kiss, the world shrinking until only the two of them existed in the moonlight. Desire, recognition, and power intertwined, each pulse of magic binding them closer. She melted into him, her fears and doubts dissolving in the heat of inevitability. As they parted, his forehead resting against hers, she could feel the final threads of the curse unraveling. You are mine, he repeated, softer now, like a prayer, a vow, a claim that transcended words. And nothing in this world will ever change that. Her hands pressed against his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat, the anchor that had been her guiding light all along. And I am yours, she whispered, her voice a vow of surrender, trust, and unbreakable love. The forest held its breath, the moonlight shimmering around them, bearing witness to the union of two souls that had always belonged together. The alpha's protective strength and her awakened power intertwined, sealing their bond in destiny, passion, and fate. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. The pack, the rivals, the world. They existed only on the edges of a night that belonged to them. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, soft gold spilling over the forest like a promise of renewal. The clearing was quiet now, the tension of the night replaced by a fragile calm. She stood beside him, the alpha, their hands intertwined, souls bound in a way that no force could sever. The pack gathered slowly, eyes wide with awe and quiet respect. The rival faction had retreated, their challenges quelled not just by power, but by the undeniable truth of the bond before them. Whispers of approval and admiration rippled through the group, acknowledging what had always been written in fate. She belonged to the alpha, and he to her. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, eyes soft now, though the commanding presence she had grown to fear and desire still lingered beneath. Are you certain? He asked quietly, not as a question of love, but of readiness to embrace everything that came with their bond. I am, she replied, her voice steady, filled with conviction. The lies, the fears, the pretense, all of it had fallen away in the moonlit revelations of the past nights. She had chosen truth, chosen him, and chosen herself. Around them, the forest seemed to exhale, the leaves rustling in gentle applause, the sunlight warming their faces. The pack approached, one by one, offering bows, nods, and words of loyalty. Their union had not only cemented their bond, but had healed old wounds, unified fractured loyalties, and quelled the tension that had threatened to splinter the pack. The alpha lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a tender kiss to her knuckles. Together, he murmured, always. She smiled, letting herself lean into him, the warmth of his body anchoring her. Always, she echoed, her soul finally at peace, the storm of fear and longing replaced with the quiet certainty of love fulfilled. Even the sun seemed to shine brighter, filtering through the canopy as though the world itself celebrated their union. She felt the subtle hum of her powers no longer chaotic, perfectly synchronized with the alpha's strength. They were unstoppable, not just as mates, but as partners, bound by destiny, soul, and unwavering trust. A soft wind carried the scent of wildflowers and forest earth, mingling with the warmth of the alpha's presence. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to savor the serenity, the safety, and the thrill of knowing that she had finally found her place. He leaned close, whispering against her ear, "The world is ours now. Nothing can take this from us." And as the dawn painted the forest in hues of gold and amber, she knew it was true. Their enemies, their secrets, even the curse that had haunted her, all of it had fallen away. In its place remained love, loyalty, and destiny fulfilled. Hand in hand, heart to heart, they stepped forward into the light, ready to face whatever the future held. Together, unbreakable, and finally, entirely free.